So a couple weeks ago, I made the Deku mask from Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and I sculpted it. And so this is a high poly sculpt, and I was thinking about using this for a demonstration of how to turn a sculpt into a game model. And I'll explain the reasons for wanting to do that as well. So one of the first issues that arises when trying to import this asset directly into a game engine is that the materials that it has that give it the color and everything, those can't be transferred to a game engine directly. So I have this large series of nodes that generate the material, and you could set something similar up in something like Unreal or something similar with a node editor. You could do all that, but it would be much easier to just have an image texture for everything. So that's one of the first problems. But another issue is that this has 500,000 tries, and that's a lot, and it's going to affect the performance of whatever game you have a lot. And to demonstrate this, I have a little Unity scene I put together. Okay, so here's the scene. We've got real-time lighting on this, and there's 500,000 tries on each of the models, and there's 27 of the models. So let's run this, and we'll see what the frame rate goes to. And 7 frames a second. So not very friendly for a game. So we should recreate the mesh as a low poly version using this high poly version. And I'm just going to go through the steps for that right now. Also, I made a little print of the model using my 3D printer, and turned out pretty good, except the nose got messed up, but that was my printer. Here it is. I'm going to paint it at some point. Not all of the little details ended up in it, or they're not as defined, but still I think it turned out pretty neat. And if we go into edit mode, we see all of this geometry, and really we don't need a lot of this. We just need the basic shape for this object. So to do that, we're just kind of going to wrap it in a low poly version. So here's how I usually get started with that. So I'll create a plane and move it to the center here. Go into edit mode. Just kind of maneuver it into position here. And I want to use the mirror modifier since this is a symmetrical shape. So mirror, and turn on clipping, so when you move it together, both sides will connect. And so if I turn on another modifier called shrink wrap, it will allow me to shrink wrap this model onto the other one. So if we look here, now this model is shrink wrapping that model, and this will allow us to see things a little clearer. So here we are, and I can move this. Another thing that's helpful, turning on snapping, and if we switch it to face, so your mouse, when it moves a vertex, it'll snap to the face that it's hovering over. So move this. Another thing is getting this so that it's not on surface, it's above surface. And then this offset. So this doesn't seem like the most effective way to do this because you already have this model, but it is a necessary thing because if this was a model we needed to animate, it would also be an issue of just the shape of the geometry in the model. So then we'll just extrude and kind of carve out this shape for the mask. So that's part one. First thing to do. All right, so I've created a time lapse for the process, and here I'm just creating that plane again, and setting everything up, snapping everything on to the face. Another step I failed to mention was you could add a subdivide. It would help you sculpt out everything in larger chunks and kind of conform to the shape of the mesh, and it would also increase the amount of detail. So just saying that. Another thing is right here, I'm creating even spaces. I want even sized faces here. So here I've started to go around the model. This was probably the way to do it, I feel. If I was going to do this again, I'd do it a little differently, but this worked for this case. I turned the overlay material to blue so I could see everything over the other model. Here I'm just going around the eyes, which was really helpful in the long run to retain that circular shape. Another thing to keep in mind is the amount of geometry you want. So like the level of detail, do you want this to be high poly or low poly? And if you start off by making this lower poly and then you add a subdivide, then you can have more control, and you could have maybe a low poly and a high poly version and a medium poly, just depending on what you need. So if you were going to have this in a close-up, you'd probably want to make a high poly version, but if the model is going to be far away at certain points, you'll probably want a low poly. And then of course you can change the texture size for the different models. So it's kind of just a lot of busy work at this point, the entire thing. There's a lot of thought that you have to use to go into this sort of thing, but after a while it's just busy work. There are programs for doing this specific thing, and I think ZBrush also has a few features for this. Okay, so now we have our new and improved mesh, and here on the left is a lower end poly count, and then in the middle we've got moderate, and then that's our sculpt on the right. So now all we need to do is tweak it and then create the textures, and we've basically got everything we need for a game ready asset. Now, of course, the details for the sculpt aren't on these models, but we'll get that back in a way that will take less render time away from us than having the actual detail in the model. So I'll be going over that next time. I've actually already gone and added the materials to these though, so if we just take a look here, I'd say that you can not really tell too much that this has less detail. So I think we're successful, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time.